and welcome to another Cram Sesh here on Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey.
And I'm Reena. And hi.
Hello.
How was your trip back to the 90s?
My trip back to the 90s.
Weren't these in like the 90s?
Oh, it's 99, but it's, yeah.
It felt very nice. I feel like it was very 90s.
It took me a second because it's very Y2K for me. So,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
But we are talking about the Matrix right now. If this little thing above us didn't give that away. So yeah, we're going through the Matrix Reloaded, and the Matrix Revolutions. One of which is still great. But yeah, we'll start with the first one, the best one. Two
kind of go together anyway.
Yeah, it feels like one movie and then part one and part two of a second movie. So
yeah.
What's your history with the franchise? Did you like see them in theaters originally, or did you?
I've only seen the first one once, so I had never. I think I saw part of the second one, and I had never seen the third one. So I have virtually no history with this at all, which is funny because I work in tech.
I don't think there's that much of a correlation there. The first movie I saw, so I was in 8th grade when it came out. My brother was working at a movie theater at the time, and I went to an employee screening before it was out. And that was my first time, like, getting a before the movie was out kind of thing. And this was sort of the biggest deal movie possible outside of, like, The Phantom Menace to be able to do that. And it blew me away. I was, like, just the right age, just the right sort of time frame for that to happen. And absolutely loved it. Still love it a decent amount. It's definitely aged a lot since that time. I haven't watched it since probably like 2005, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the action stuff still hits. It doesn't get, like, the philosophical stuff doesn't get too literally religious in the first one. It like does just enough to like hint at stuff, but like it's boiled down within like this action set piece sort of motif that it's actually just a who am I story. And so it's a really cool thing to have this juxtaposition of like a really simple idea of that, where it's also within this super convoluted universe of pretty extraordinary world building when you like kind of just put it all up there. But yeah, that's sort of where I am with it at this point.
Like I never was like a big Matrix fan, and I know it, but I do
Matrix head.
I do appreciate one, its contribution to pop culture. Which is massive, and not just in the storytelling, but also in like the
literal references everybody else used afterwards.
Right? But even how they filmed it, like that first shot in the first movie with Trinity with the 360 camera, and that became like a whole thing. But second, I appreciate it more now, I think, because of how much anime I watch. Because I wasn't into anime when these first came out, so I didn't... It puts it in a different perspective for me, and like some of the stuff I was like, what? I'm now more accustomed to from, things like
there's tropes
Ghost in the Shell and like a bunch of other things. Yeah. So it's kind of like an anime. It's kind of like a live action anime.
It gets a lot more anime as you go on. But
yeah.
You didn't watch the Animatrix, did you, when you were watching these?
I did not watch the Animatrix.
You should. It's good. It's better than the 2 sequels of the trilogy. And it's like Star Wars Visions, where it's like just these different sort of perspectives and looks at the world of the Matrix. But yeah, it's very cyber anime, like that early 90s style anime that I would catch on like Saturday midday. No, not even that. It was like Sci-Fi Channel back in the 90s on Saturdays would show like anime movies that I had no idea what they were. I just turned them on. Um, but yeah, it it's such an interesting thing that like it became this groundbreaking, influential thing. I sort of put it in the same kind of place as Star Wars, where it's
Wow.
heavily well. I just mean in terms of
That's high
not
praise.
not in terms of that. I just mean in terms of how influential it became for pop culture in general. But in actuality, it relies on other pop culture that existed well before it. Otherwise, it just would never come together. And so
Mhm.
it's an interesting thing to look at with that, because it is like it's a pretty, especially when you look at the trilogy as a whole, it's a pretty straightforward who am I story, but also like then it's like the Christ story. It's the waking up from who you think you are story. Um it's just a lot of these different things that like are tropes of themselves that it like sort of not even regurgitated, but just like re contextualized for itself in a way that felt new.
Mhm.
And at the time, you know, we had a return to Star Wars around the same time in
Mhm.
1999. We had a couple of original things go through, but like even then, that's when we were in franchise mode at that point, and this became a sort of a victim of that. But it is sort of the only huge original idea that blew up this way, and kind of still is. Like nothing else sort of hit this level of original IP since this happened. And when this happened, it had been probably like 10 years at that point. So
I was thinking about
it's
that. I was thinking about that too, though, like in terms of like original ideas, because I feel like nowadays we get a lot of sequels, we get a lot of reboots. Uh,
adaptations.
yeah, but even like are gonna obviously review the new one, but like has the same characters for the most part, and like it's a strong enough story where they can continue. Listen, Keanu Reeves is still in this, so that's what counts. But I think also,
There's a lot of new characters in the new movie. I won't go too far into it because we are going to talk about it. I just finished watching it though. There's a lot of new characters that are outstanding in the new movie.
but
Um,
the other thing too
and
is
Jessica
because of
Henwick, always good.
I was gonna say, I think these movies carried on because it struck a chord with the way the world is and technology, and those things have only continued to grow since these movies have come out.
Yeah,
So, and form and themes that might have seemed a little more out there back like when we first saw them, like seem more prevalent now. Although, if I'm really plugged into a program, can I have a different one? Is there like an upgrade? Is there a system update that I'm missing? Can I stop being in the pandemic simulation now?
yeah.
Is there who do I request this from? Which robot overlord can handle this for me?
Neil Patrick Harris. But yeah, I guess we'll sort of just like blend in to the next ones now, because it is the first movie is what it is. It
Mhm.
is waking up and finding out who the real you is, and that's obviously a huge thing for the directors. The Wachowskis had their own awakening to deal with, and it this is a core of many of their movies. This is one of the most core to their story. Um, and then it sort of the next two sort of get away from that a little more, and do a lot more of the sort of the Christ imagery and all that stuff. But the issue I have with, or not the issue, but some of the issues I have with the follow-ups with Reloaded and Revolutions is that they just feel like different movies than the first movie,
Mhm.
like because the technology moved forward in that 4 years. and a lot more CG happened, and rather than just, doing cool stuff in camera with some CG, the first movie had more of that blend, and then they relied so much more on the CG stuff that it just tonally and visually has a different feel than the first movie. But also, it's the cool thing we see with the Matrix is the Matrix.
And these were
And
very much.
I know you have to tell
Mhm.
the story of like the real world,
Mhm.
but the second movie is mostly the real world, and that shit's boring. Like it's
I
not
remember the
fun.
spaceships. To be honest with you, watching it again, I like
Well,
totally
the
forgot that there were
Nebuchadnezzar,
ships.
yeah, the Nebuchadnezzar is the one sort of memorable one, just because the name, but it's also
Mhm.
the main one that they're on in the first movie even. So, um, but yeah, it's frustrating to and I'm sure they felt like it was the right idea, but like to get away from what made that first movie feel cool, feel special, um, and sort of rip most of that away to tell the real world story, which you can still tell. I think it's just that they went a little too far with it.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I liked some of the real world stuff because again, like what's the point of if you're living this fabulous, I don't know, fake life, right? Everything's going good. Like what's the point of unplugging? And I think they were trying to like, show like choice and freedom and like why this matters.
Right.
But like as a contrast to like why you wouldn't just like just chill, like no, because most people don't know, most people are blissfully unaware of what's happening. It was like that
Well,
was like the
that's the whole
key.
cipher thing.
Exactly.
It's which is done so well that that stake scene is very very good and does such a great job to counterbalance the like we want out no matter how hard it's going to be. There are those people that are going to be like, no, I want in because I don't want to deal with that harsh real world. Um,
But I
so
think that's why they were trying to like, I don't know, like soften it a little bit, but it was too much. I'm agreeing with you. It was
yeah.
just too, we are too out of the matrix.
Well, that's the thing is like once you get out of the Matrix, you start to get into that sort of Shakespearean soliloquy kind of like
Hmm.
why was everybody talking like the way that Morpheus does his speech is like this
Yeah.
King Lear fucking over the top speech. It's just like that's not who the character is. Philosophical in the first movie, and in the second movie and the third movie he just becomes this like religious zealot, which is just
Yeah.
like he makes this weird uh progression of like little bit of that in the first one, but more, sort of the Socrates side of just like what does this mean? Where
But it works
he's
because it's
full
new.
force, yeah, but he's
Yeah.
full force in the second one, and I think that's where uh sort of the detrimental anime aspects come in, where they're just like
Hmm.
we need to make these characters like 16 on a scale of 10, where they're just like
Hmm.
going way beyond what anyone would naturally do, and it's a detriment because it does get like worse and worse, like from 1 to 2 to 3 it's just like step down, another step down. It doesn't even plateau with those two second movies.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, like you can get away with it in the first movie because you're introducing the characters and there's a lot of mystery, right? As Neo is trying to figure out what the hell is going on and who these people are and all of this stuff. So like you can be a little more like philosophical. You can have that little more like because you're a mysterious figure at that point, or
Right.
Morpheus is like a mysterious figure. But then like now we know the character and we're like, all right, dude, like we get it now. Like no, we got you. Like we're on board, 100%.
Yeah.
Hear you, sir. Got it. Carry on.
And it's a bummer because like the second movies do have good ideas, they're
Hmm.
just not executed very well. Like
It's like we
the
can see where they wanted to go.
yeah, like Smith coming into the real world is a very
Hmm.
cool idea, a very scary idea. Um,
Hmm.
but the way
What a
that it's
great villain too. By the
yeah,
way.
but just the way that it's done is just like, all right, Like, I know you want to make sure the audience knows what's happening, but you don't have to make the guy in the real world do an impression of Hugo Weaving doing the character. Like, it's a little too much.
Yeah.
And that sort of is the problem with the latter two movies in the trilogy, is it's too much. The borderline orgy scene is like, I know you want to show that like life is full of this energy and this passion, but you don't have to show like a couple thousand people having a sweaty rave orgy. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, pull it back, just reel it in like a little bit, and you would have gone for it like 100%.
I think that's sometimes what happens when you have a really successful first movie, that one, you want to top it, and two, you get the freedom to throw a lot more shit in it, that you're like, yeah, just do the
you have a lot more
orgy.
Yeah, you have a lot more creative control over it, I think, at that point. I think less so nowadays, but like back then you certainly had like way more control over that stuff. So you do go like, nah, we're going for it. We're gonna do the orgy scene.
Like, these filmmakers have great ideas. Let them do whatever they want. They're like, hear me out, okay? Let's show life thriving.
But there was no hear me out. They just kind of
no. I
did
mean,
it.
like behind
Yeah.
the scenes.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate because like there is this legacy with the first movie, and to a degree, the trilogy as a whole. But like it's almost all the first movie. And like going back, I do not fall asleep in movies. Like, no matter what's happening, I don't fall asleep in movies. I fell asleep rewatching the third movie again. And to a degree, I almost felt like before we did this episode, I was going to have to rewatch both Reloaded and Revolutions again, because they're just such a, like, it's hard to differentiate what's happening in both of them, because they're also like, they came out like 6 months apart from one another too. Like, it's all,
they kind of like Deathly Hallows did, if I'm trying to remember. But
yeah, they filmed them at the same time.
I did the same thing. I like fell asleep and woke up again, but I didn't bother. Like, I just moved on.
Yeah.
I was just like, you know what? I know enough. We're not going into like explicit plot details of each film individually.
Yeah.
It's more of the impact, the key themes, you know, the universe itself. So it's like,
Yeah.
I'm good if I missed whatever just happened in these 10 minutes.
Because that is
not
the
for the
thing.
first one, but for the other two.
Yeah, but that is the thing with like the latter two, is there is like some good stuff in them, but it's just all bogged down. Like, the idea of Neo and Trinity going to the machine world is good.
Mm-hmm.
The way it's done, not necessarily, and to have to sit through the whole second movie before they even get there. That's the thing, is this, like, these two movies are just one movie that are just way too long, so it's two movies. And
do you think that there's one really good movie in there? Like one really good sequel?
I think there's a good movie in there. I don't think there's a really good movie in there. Because it's still what it is. Like, what's on the screen is like, you can chop stuff out, but like, it's still what it is. Like, my problems with how they do dialogue, my problems with like, it's all still gonna be there. Which is a problem. So
every time I woke up, there were more Agent Smiths. There's just more agents.
But see, so when
happened?
When you originally told me that you had never seen Reloaded and Revolutions, I was like curious how you would actually react to them, because as you go through those two movies, they get more and more anime, to the point where there are hundreds of like mech things shooting at an army of floating robot sentinels. So I was like, I wonder, granted that I don't think mech anime is necessarily your like number one forte
No,
with
I've
anime.
I will admit I've never even seen Evangelion. Like I don't feel
Yeah,
like I'm ready.
I think you're a little more slice of life with stuff,
Like I'm
but
over here being like, have you seen Demon Slayer?
yeah, but
But
it is this thing where it's like I was actually very curious to see what your reaction was going to be, because as you go through the second and third movie, it is just like, oh shit, this is even more anime than before. Oh shit, this is even
mhm.
more anime than before. Oh shit, this is even more, to the point where it's like the final fight between Smith and Neo, like in the rain where they're both floating in the sky. It's like, that is the most live action anime thing that has ever, like, I think that fight scene is great. Like,
There
that is
should
one of
have
the
been
good
like
things
the
that's in it.
theme song playing like that, like because that's like the finale of like every anime with the big fight and like the theme comes back.
Yeah,
That's what.
the theme from season 1.
Yeah,
You bring
exactly
that back
right.
in, yeah.
But again, I
Um
wouldn't have appreciated it at the time if I had seen these when they came out because like I wasn't into anime back then and I wasn't really even like a big moviegoer. I was like definitely a blockbuster kid. I was like a big movie renter because I also worked at a video store.
mhm.
So like going to the theater and seeing them like didn't have the same thing. It was more of a watch it on my own time kind of person. But yeah, like I wouldn't have made those connections then that
Yeah.
I do now.
Yeah. It's I this is gonna, I think this is actually gonna, for a cram sesh where we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
3 movies, it's so weird. I think this is gonna be such a short episode. Like, we're at 20 minutes right now, and I'm like, I almost feel like there's nothing left to talk about, just because
Well,
it's
because
like,
there's like one great revolutionary movie, and then two like subsequent movies that like I don't know. It's hard when one is just such a better quality and did such great world building and I mean the character. We haven't even really talked too much about like Keanu Reeves as Neo and Carrie Ann Moss as Trinity and Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus and just you know how I feel about like female characters and how badass Trinity is, like through this whole
yeah,
thing, and like how amazing she is. And then this at the time, like obviously like Keanu Reeves is the star, but like we didn't really have so many female action heroes outside, like so at that time that I can think of off the top of my head, except for maybe Linda Hamilton and like Terminator.
yeah.
So that was phenomenal on top of it. But other than that, like once we start getting into like the fall of Zion, I'm like, nah.
Yeah, that's, it's so bizarre because like there's such good world building for like the background lore of the Matrix, but like
Hmm.
the storytelling of what's actually happening just doesn't work out. And it's,
Well, like or like the Oracle, and there's because there's an interesting juxtaposition of the like religious prophecy belief stuff with also very like technical Rise of the Machines. And
yeah,
like sometimes it's great and sometimes it's like what?
yeah. Well, that is the whole like ghost in the shell thing. It's the soul
Hmm.
in the machine, and it's, yeah, it's, I think all of that stuff is handled fine.
They kept just yelling chosen one. I'm like, I know that's the wrong movie.
Yeah. Well,
Chosen one.
it's the thing. Oh yeah, there's, by the way, with the kid, like the character, the kid,
Mhm.
who is like the most annoying fucking character in this whole movie. Um,
That's like a
if
nine. That's like a rule, though. You have like during this time frame of movies, you need one really annoying character.
Well, but there's context for him in the Animatrix. There's no
Oh.
context to who this kid is and why he's so obsessed with Neo, other than,
Hmm.
like you heard he, like, Neo's the one that got him out. But
Hmm.
there's actually one of the segments is his segment in the Animatrix.
Oh.
And so that's why it is worth watching the Animatrix, because it does like flesh out some of these things, but it also just shows you a cool look at the world of characters we don't necessarily have on screen in the movies. But yeah, it's, there are things in these movies that are super cool that are like glossed over. Like
Hmm.
the Merovingian, I think, is like super cool. Like, that is, they're literally doing them going through hell. It's the club, hell is
Hmm.
hell. The
Hmm.
Merovingian is Hades. Persephone
Hmm.
is his wife.
Yeah.
That is literally just out of like ancient Greek mythology. Like,
Yeah.
so it's a cool, like, yeah, it's been used before and in many ways, but like it's a cool way to do it in this. To have, you know, this sort of Iliad and Odyssey journey going on, but it's lost because they don't actually like do a good job explaining what is going on. They just kind of go there,
Hmm.
and I think it's a cool idea to have him going back and forth between English and French without the
Hmm.
subtitles. I think that's a cool idea that also is detrimental to the aspect of like half the time I took French in high school and I don't remember shit.
Yeah.
Um I don't know conjugation, I don't know most words anymore. Besides unfuk, which is one seal, because we all
Oh.
laughed at the fact that it was basically fuck. Um,
My mom calls me mon petit fleur. My mom can
the
speak
little
French.
fire, is that what it is?
Flower.
A little flower. Yeah. See,
Little flower.
I knew little. That's it. Um, but yeah, I think that's sort of maybe a little bit of an issue with like losing track of one of the actual like good things in the movie. It could have been even better if we were allowed to sort of like actually understand everything that was going on, because it's cool to have like these exiles, like
Hmm.
vampires and werewolves exist in this, but like
Hmm.
that's never explored. It's just said for like a second. It does have like, I said this a long time ago when we talked about the new movie coming out, where technically the video games are all canon to the Matrix.
Hmm.
And that is also sort of an issue because it's so much of like the cool stuff and a lot of plot points that are intrinsic to like what goes on even in the next movie. It's sort of requisite, and that's an impossible thing to do. Like, sure, you can load up YouTube and like watch cutscenes or whatever, but like it's sort of impossible to like live it the way that it was supposed to be lived. You can't just turn it on like a movie. So yeah.
Yeah. Although, thinking about how storytelling has changed, especially in like the last like few years, where we get more big budget series, I wonder like if this was like say like the Matrix like sequels were coming out now, if they did them as like Netflix or like
Well, it would be HBO
Amazon,
Max.
like
Yeah.
yeah, they'd be like, but like I'm talking like big budget
Yeah.
series. If it would have like given them time to explain these pieces and put together instead of like back then you just had to cram everything into movies.
Yeah.
Like that's all you got. And they
Don't
so then they
worry.
did.
When we come back to do an episode for the new movie, we will talk more about that and how I think that that is where it needs to go. That is,
So see, I'm
yeah.
on it.
But that's the thing, is like they're it's a weird thing to see, like, because you have that idea with like the Star Wars sequels, the newest movies, where there wasn't really a plan. So
Mhm.
it's a little disjointed. It's a little like The Force Awakens captures the nostalgia, The Last Jedi captures like a new story. And then when like certain people didn't like that, they were just like, well, we can go back and fix that in Rise of Skywalker, and it didn't. So like you would think with something like The Matrix, where they had time to plan and actually like do the second two movies all at once, that it would have actually, that would have helped them out. But it's like, I think that's almost worse. I think given that free reign was just a roadblock to what needed to actually be done. Because if they were just told like, we're going to do a second one, see how that goes, and then we'll do a third one, they could at least, they could set up a third one without having to be like stretching out a story that should be multiple movies but like is
Mhm.
only one movie. Yeah, it's
Yeah. But that was like the thing back then because it was very successful for Lord of the Rings to film at the same time, to like get everything kind of done. They stretched out Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows into two films. Like that was like a thing
Yeah.
for a while. Was that like either
Well,
like take
it was the final book. The final book
yeah
sort
the
of became
final.
two movies. This was very much like the beginning of that, which was,
Mhm.
granted, it's not based on a book, but like it is that sort of beginning of, let's make it two and stretch it out, which did come back with like The Hobbit later and stuff,
Mhm.
which would have been fine, honestly, I think, if it was stretched out to two books, but then they stretched it out to three books.
Mhm.
But yeah, like Hunger Games and Harry Potter and all that stuff,
Yeah.
Twilight, all did, not that I'm thinking Twilight is, up here or anything, but
Listen, a
it's,
lot happens in Breaking Dawn.
there's a real weird baby in it.
A very, very terrifying baby.
I've only seen pictures of that. I've only seen the first movie.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not good.
yeah.
It's not
Um,
okay.
but
But
yeah, like
anyway, yeah.
I still have a valid appreciation for some of the stuff in the second two movies, but really, like, my love of the Matrix is literally the first movie, and I played Enter the Matrix, and it's not a
Mhm.
great video game. It is a very rough video game. It does not, like, I remember it was a PS2 game, and I remember playing it at the time and being like, this doesn't feel good to play. Like, it's mechanically very, like, unmanageable, like trying to
Mm.
control your character in that. But it's, there is expansion to certain characters. Like, I if I remember correctly, you play as Nairobi and
Mhm.
Ghost. Um so you get to play as two characters and get a little bit more story for them, which is cool because, yeah, we haven't talked much about characters in this, but like,
Mhm.
Nairobi is a pointless character in these two movies. She is there to be an added conflict between Morpheus and Locke, and it
Mhm.
is a bummer because Jada Pinkett Smith is, she does what she can with the material, but
Mhm.
like, it's a bad role. It's a bad character in these movies.
Well, that
Yeah,
and I'm praising like Trinity for being like a badass
and it's complete
superhero. It's
opposite.
and it's like literally a plot device for like the male characters.
Yeah, she does have
Not to
one of the
like
best lines in those two movies, though. When she's piloting that ship, when they have to like crash it into Zion, and she takes it on like a huge like G-force turn. She just goes, she's got a fat ass. I was like, okay, Jada Pinkett Smith, you get the line of these two movies.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's too much and too little in the wrong places.
Mhm.
I think that's sort of the boiled down thing I have about the second two movies, because the first movie is cheesy as hell, which
Mhm.
I always will talk about. Like, I think cheesy can be a very good thing. Like, it just means you give a shit, um and you're being sincere about something. It's just that sincerity stops at one point and overindulgence kicks in, like where that leaves off. So it's a bummer, because I remember being fine with the second two movies in theaters when I saw them, and not like caring about like revisiting them. I had not watched them since it was in theaters before, but I was like, those were fine. And now revisiting them, I'm like, those are not so hot. Um,
You're like, yeah, no, no.
yeah, they're,
Decisions were made.
the stuff that's good in them isn't there for long enough, and the stuff that's bad is the prominent stuff in the movie, and that's where it's a letdown. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're not going to spoil this for me, obviously, but I am excited to watch the new one.
The
But also
only the
because
only
we
thing I
know.
will say about it is I enjoyed it.
Well, that and like, through all this, like we've also learned that Keanu Reeves is like the nicest human being on the planet, which makes
Yeah.
me want to watch all of his movies anyway.
Well, and this is also like not even that, but like this is the first. So this is only Lana doing this movie. It's not
Hmm.
both the Wachowskis. Um, it's the first movie we've seen since their transition, and to see them revisit it, especially with the fact that she said it was she revisited Neo and Trinity for Resurrections.
Hmm.
There's a big reason why that's the name, is because she lost her parents and a friend like very close together in the last few years.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't know
and
that
so
part.
this was her dealing with that grief by
Hmm.
resurrecting things from her past that are very important to her. So it was, when you watch it with that knowledge, you can see that shine through. Like it is very important that these characters are brought back to life for her. So it's, yeah. Um but we'll obviously, I don't
Hmm.
want to like get too in depth with that, but like that's where I'll
Because
leave
we're
that
gonna, yeah.
off
But yeah,
leading
but
into
again,
that
that's a
episode.
testament to what she created, right?
Yeah.
When you can revisit these characters like they're a part of you and they are a part of pop culture history, and you can bring them back and everyone goes, oh yeah, and we're talking about our memories right now. Plenty of people are talking about at least the first movie. I feel like everyone on the planet saw the first movie at some point. So
For,
that's an
legitimately
incredible creative feat.
legitimately for most people, that first movie is the first DVD they owned. Like for
Hmm.
people in our generation, it is almost a guarantee. Like 8 out of 10 people, most likely they all had that same, like back when they were the like cardboard covers with just the little clip that was plastic, like that.
You can picture what it looks like, right? I can picture the cover of that right now in my head.
That I have a tangible memory of like the click of opening up
Hmm.
that case. And so I
Yep.
think a lot of people have that same, not even nostalgia, but just sort of reverence for that movie. Which is why the latter two wound up being such a disappointment for a lot of people, because that movie is like a specific time period for a lot of people. So,
Hmm.
they are what they are. I think going forward, I if I revisit them, I will revisit the first one and then possibly the new one. Which again,
I'm
we'll
gonna
we'll
check
get
out
more into.
Animatrix. That
You
sounds
should, and
more actually more interesting.
it's when they're on HBO Max, but they
Hmm.
do it as like one big movie. So you just turn it on and it'll just play them back to back to back to back. It's not chapters or anything. It's just one long file. So um even more so than watching, Star Wars Visions. It's just like watching a movie that's a bunch of vignettes. So it is cool. Some of them don't hit, but I'd say it's like 50-50. So yeah.
Hmm.
But
But I would even say like if these movies didn't exist, we wouldn't have like half the stuff that we have on Netflix now. Like
yeah,
between like Altered Carbon and the League of Legends movie that's like blowing up, and I'm trying to think of
the
what
show,
other
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like that just came
Arcane.
out. Hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of what else. There's been like so
Well,
many
it's not
other.
even like, it's
Or what is the
not
what's
even
the
just
big
that, but like Spy Kids, I don't think would exist. Like there's just like there are tons of
this is a
things.
Spike, the origin of Spy Kids.
I
I know what you're
honestly,
saying,
I
but I
think so.
never
It's
would have
just
thought that.
it's that era, that like
The
post
tiny sunglass era.
Y2K, yeah. That post Y2K era is like entirely due to the Matrix. Like every scary movie did a bunch of Matrix stuff, and it's a parody of horror movies. So
Hmm.
there's the impact that first movie had is astounding. Like it is genuinely like basically Star Wars level of impact, but condensed into like a 7-year span. And it's wild that happened, because like, yeah,
Hmm.
there's influence now, but not like as like direct as that is. It's like, I think it's more conceptually influential now, whereas before it was technically influential.
Like if I make a joke, and I've made this joke several times in here. Oh, there was a glitch in the Matrix. Everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's the lexicon. Like
Yeah.
it is like, it's the people doing these aren't the droids you're looking for. Like the passing references that are just like in the zeitgeist now forever.
But I'd even argue there's that whole camp of people who like take pride in never seeing Star Wars, and my sister is one of them, but would get the Matrix reference.
I mean, I think they would still know it was a Star Wars reference too.
I think I just know more basic people than you do.
Well, but like the I am your father thing, like people know that's Star Wars.
She would not get that, but she knows the Matrix.
All right. But yeah,
I mean, we've talked about the last two movies being like, bleh, but like as we look at it as a whole, as a mythos, it's an incredible like creation.
Yeah, and it is that thing where like, I think there were comics, but like I feel like the Matrix is one of those worlds where like there could have been a really cool extended universe of like novels, like the way that Star Wars had the now like legacy stuff that it's non-canon anymore, but like the Shadows of the Empires and stuff like that. I think there would have been a lot of cool stuff, and the timeline of those first movies is a certain cycle, and I would like to see the 5 other cycles that happened before that. Like there's so much that goes on. There's so much exposition in those, like with the architect and stuff, where it's just like he's just talking and talking and talking, but there's little bits of lore that are just like, that would have been cool. That would have been cool to see, and we just never. I don't think we'll ever get that, which is unfortunate. But you know, we have that first movie.
We do.
Yeah.
Piece of history.
And we have that clip that goes around every once in a while of the news interviewing a couple people waiting outside of the Matrix Reloaded, where they're all dressed up in like Matrix garb, and they're all wearing patent leather jackets, and they're all wearing tiny sunglasses, except for that one last guy that goes, "I'm a Sentinel."
It was a great time for faux leather and tiny sunglasses.
The amount of content that has come out of like midnight showing lines for movies back in that era, it's just glorious. But yeah, I think we could probably call it on this, our revisit of the Matrix trilogy. We'll be back not too long from now with an episode on the follow-up of the Matrix Resurrections. So until then, goodbye.